I'm the presenter. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are located. My name is Gabriela Castro. I am the Executive Director of Global Chamber, Querétaro, Mexico. And also I am the CEO and founder of the international business consulting firm, Trade in Motion. We support companies to do business in North America, Mexico, the USA, and Canada. Today, we have great speakers and a great moderator for our webinar on sustainability, a hot topic and very interesting. So thank you very much to Jerry Hanna, Angie Robinson, and Melissa Sanderson for being part of this event. Doug Bronke, also, he is present and he is the president of Global Chamber. I will leave everybody to introduce themselves. Maybe we can begin with Doug to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Global Chamber and the benefits of being a member.
Well, I mean, certainly I thank you very much, Gabriela, for today's meeting. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and we are working to get more trade and business between countries, because ultimately by having trade, you'll need less soldiers. And in today's world, we can certainly recognize that. We have a webinar, Globinar, on the 31st of this month with the group in Ukraine with members there. I hope we can pull that one off. However, it's looking pretty terrible. So let's see what we can do, all of us, to stop what's happening there and move on to things that are important, like business and family and being together and having a peaceful existence. So Gabriela, thank you for your time and efforts today, and I look forward to learning more. I will say, as kind of a further introduction to Mel, is that I came to Phoenix, Arizona, where our headquarters are now in the Thunderbird School of Global Management, through a company called, at the time, Phelps Dodge, subsequently became Freeport-McMoRan, and I was head of sales and marketing there. So I went from a kind of a technology polymers background with the DuPont company into the mining industry. And I got kind of a rude awakening, if you will, of understanding what's going on there. And I did feel that there were things that were a little bit of a step behind. I think sustainability may or may not be one of those areas, because sustainability, like the chemical industry where I'm from, it's critically important that they clean up after themselves. And there's certainly been many cases where that's not been the case, but there's also many cases where it is happening. Mel has been a leader in the mining industry, and she joined Freeport-McMoRan, as I mentioned before, after her long experience in the Foreign Service and extreme deep connections in the DRC enabled her to be very effective in her role to be an intermediary between the private industry and the government. So Mel, thank you for all that you do and your deep knowledge of the industry, and thankful that you're here today. Back to you, Gabriela.
Thank you very much, Doug. Now I would like to introduce our moderator, the well-known Melissa Sanderson.
You know what? I think Doug has already introduced lots of my aspects. So particularly in the interest of saving time for what I hope is going to be a really robust conversation, I will pass the mic. You're on mute, Gabby.
Sorry, thank you. Angie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure, Gabriela. My name is Angie Robinson. I am the Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Social Responsibility, and Interim Vice President of Human Resources for Torx Gold Resources. I've been with the company about a year and a half. Before that, I spent 15 years at Inco and then Valley in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, overseeing communications, corporate affairs, Indigenous relations, and sustainability for our North Atlantic operations. So really great to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you for accepting the invitation, Angie. Jerry, it's your turn.
Oh,
Please,
my goodness.
we want to listen to you.
I don't know about that, but my name is Jerry Hanna. I'm the founder and President CEO of Clearflow Group in Canada, Clearflow Group US in Arizona. We've opened up an office down here about 2020, right in the middle of COVID, which was an extremely interesting time to do that, but we made her through. But we I go back to Doug's comments on polymers. My background is in water transfer systems, water process for about the last 47 years. I hate to say it, but going back to the mid 1970s. And about 16 years ago, I was approached by a mine and said, look, we have a bunch of troubles with washing of materials and getting it into fish-bearing streams. Could you help us? So I invented a product that actually cleans water. It's totally benign. It's safe for the environment, and it's extremely passive and low energy use. So it's something very unique to the industry. And we've been dealing with mines all over the world now, I guess, for the last 16 years. So very, very happy to be here. Thank you for letting me join.
Thank you for accepting the invitation, Jerry. So Melissa, the microphone is all yours.
Okay, well, I want to just make a couple of scene setting sort of remarks for our conversation. I would say that the mining industry is facing some really unprecedented challenges that we haven't seen, golly, in over 50 years. For those who are familiar with the industry, there's a real shockwave going on. Chile, a country which traditionally has been very mining friendly and has been actually the largest copper producing country in the world for decades, appears to be moving legislatively towards nationalization of copper and lithium and other materials that, you know, fall under the rubric of critical. They're not the first country to be doing what I personally call, you know, legislative nationalization or semi-legalized nationalization. Indonesia actually, to the best of my knowledge, was the first, when they also changed their constitution and mining law to ensure that the country would be the majority owner of the major projects, those existing as well as new ones. Doug mentioned what's going on in the DRC. It's another good example. The government had passed a law a couple of years ago, allowing them to revise and assume control of companies that were deemed to be not fulfilling their contractual obligations in regards to their government partner, which is the mining company called Gécamines. Due to allegations that Tenke Fungurume was several $100 million behind in tax obligations and other legal requirements, the government of the DRC has removed all of the Chinese leadership and placed the company in a 6-month receivership while an outside auditor looks at the allegations. If the auditor sustains the allegations, the government will take control of Tenke Fungurume and seek a new operator. So all of these fall under that category of legislated nationalization. That's a huge challenge because generally speaking, companies versus countries, companies don't win, especially when the countries are changing the rules of the game. So there's one huge issue for sustainability that the industry is confronting today. The other one, the inescapable, climate change. Water is an issue everywhere. Congratulations, Jerry, you got into it early. And obviously other related issues as well. We have hotter temperatures to contend with in some places. We have colder temperatures to contend with in some places. So we'll touch on this. And for me personally, the hardest part in the famous or infamous ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is the S, because the S is about people. And a lot of the legislative changes that we're seeing, including in Chile, stem directly from changed expectations in the public. We saw students rioting in Chile for a couple of years. And across Latin America, when students start writing, governments start paying attention. And their demands were that the mining industry has not done enough for the country, that too much attention has been paid to the local economy, to the local communities adjacent to the mines, and not enough to governments. Now, we all know the mining industry has very logically resisted these calls in the past by saying that that's why we pay all these taxes. Governments are supposed to deliver national services, not companies. But that may not be good enough any longer. So with that backdrop, I'd actually like to start our conversation with a question to both of our panelists. And it flows directly from the last thing that I said. So we see this mounting wave or perception in many countries that companies should be doing more to share the benefits of mining throughout the nation and not just with local communities. The first and most fundamental question is, for the mining company, is that even possible? So if your answer to that is yes, then how about talking about a couple of program examples where a hypothetical company could be doing more in a national context? And I'm not going to victimize either of you on this one. One of you can spring in and start.
Jerry, I'm happy to go if you.
Go ahead, Angie.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so thanks for the question, and thanks again for inviting me to be here. Maybe before Melissa, I answer the question, if I could just provide a little bit of context about our company, just to set context. So Torx Gold is a mid-tier gold producer. We've got operations in Guerrero State. We're in a remote area, sort of equidistance between Mexico City and Acapulco. Our company was formed about a decade ago. We started commercial production in 2016, and we literally built our operations from the ground up. And we're now the second largest gold producer in the country. We've got about 1,000 direct employees and another 1,700 contractors. And our operations are a combination of open pit and underground mining operations with a fully integrated processing facility. And I should say at the end of this month, we're actually releasing a feasibility study for our Media Luna project. This is an underground gold and copper mine. It's about 6 kilometers from our existing operations. And really that represents our future in Guerrero State. So, you know, really looking forward to that and looking to have a long life of operations in Mexico. With respect to your question, I think, you know, when you look at some of our key metrics, it's clear that we do share the benefits of mining very broadly in Mexico beyond just our host communities. 99% of our workforce is from Mexico. Of that, 60% is from Guerrero and 45% from our local communities, but only 1% of our employees are international. And so from an employment perspective, the benefit of our reach is quite broad. And it's a similar story in terms of our contractor workforce. Similarly, if you look at procurement, 1% comes from host communities, and we're working hard to increase that and to build capacity. 9% is from Guerrero-based companies, but 77% is from other companies in Mexico. So, you know, in 2020, our procurement spend was about $430 million. So this is quite significant. And when you mentioned taxes, if you look at the taxes we paid in 2020, it was about 180 million US to local, state, and federal governments. So again, this highlights the fact that we do share the benefits of more broadly in Mexico. I will say though, we have always operated with the philosophy that we need to share the benefits with our host communities, with the ones that are right beside us, and that when we do well, our communities do well. And so I'll just give you an example of part of what that looks like. So we have about 11 very small communities around our operations. And we partner with them through their community development agreements. We call them CODACOP agreements. And we have 11 unique agreements with each of those communities surrounding our operations. And under the agreements, community projects are defined according to local needs, local priorities. CODACOP committees are established with each community with local leadership, because we really want to empower local decision making. I think too many times mining companies come in and do what they think the community needs without actually asking and listening to what they really need or want. And typical projects that we've supported over the years, everything from infrastructure developments like roads, education. Last year, we opened a new healthcare facility in Nuevo Balsas, which is one of the larger communities around our operations that all of the 11 local communities can have access to. Clean water and sanitation projects and cultural initiatives. Definitely, culture is very, very important in the area where we operate. We've built a number of churches and again, things that are important for the communities. Beyond these agreements, we also look for opportunities to build local procurement capacity. And one of my favorite examples of this is a company that we provided seed capital for. It's called Confessiones Luna. And it was developed after we, one, recognized a need that we needed clothing and uniforms for our company. And two, that there was a lot of local women in the surrounding communities that were excellent at sewing and that we could really, use their skills and their expertise. And so this company was started, and now not only does Confessiones Luna supply clothing for our company, they've branched out to grow to supply other companies so that they'll be sustainable beyond the life of our operations. So just an example of the approach we take there.
Cool. From my perspective, I guess one of the things that I would mention is communication is changing in the mining world. I go back to the days my grandfather was in the mining, and the mine dealt with who the mine dealt with. As a matter of fact, I got into a major mining company because somebody worked with my dad 35 years earlier, and that's the only reason we got on the mine, and then they loved it, and we got 6 more mines because of it. Strange but true. It's a very small world. I think that world needs to grow, and through communication and also expanding what you're doing in those markets and start to showcase the benefits of what is happening for the environment side, which is where we work. There's many mines that are trying to be proactive in their world. They're trying to make changes so it gives better water quality and better sustainability in the area with the local towns and things like that. But a lot of this isn't getting communicated out. It's not getting heard. And we're hearing a lot of negative press against some of the things that are going on because they're still looking at this old world form of mining. Legacy mining is now a big deal, and they're coming back in and saying, okay, is the mine going to be reopened, or is this mine now closed fully? How do we now manage the water quality for that legacy mine, things like that, and how do we manage the environment? And people are putting millions of dollars in behind that, some by the government, some by shared process, some by just the companies themselves as they're doing mine closure. I do a lot of lectures for universities and on engineering side and the chemistry side. And one of the things that we're always talking about is now we're designed for closure. We're not designing for operations anymore. So it makes a big difference. I think communication to me is a critical mass. I think the sharing of knowledge, it's interesting. I would suggest in the last probably 18 months, we've expanded into Brazil. We're now going into Australia, and we just sent our first shipment to Nigeria. So these things are now happening. People are starting to realize there are technologies out there that are better and newer and can use them. I have a problem. I actually ran into this in Canada a number of years ago. And you'd mentioned, Angie, that you're dealt with Indigenous and also in the Sudbury area. We're actually doing a new mine opening in the Sudbury area right now.
Oh,
so
right.
It's a lot of fun going on a major mine site. But I'm actually also Métis, which in Canada is reserved as the same rights as First Nations Aboriginal. So that makes it very interesting. We've tried to get together, and I think this is more needed, where there's Aboriginal lands around these mines, pardon me, in that we offer training in the environmental sector for the Aboriginal groups that are around us, start to get them to build in, because their world is built around nature. And how do we get them to realize that nature can be part of industry as well? And how do we update that? So I'm a strong proponent of that. I've tried to bring together some programs in Canada to do that. We're working on one right now, probably the largest project for our company. If we can get it working, it's actually in the oil sands. The two major companies, Suncor and Syncrude, have brought us on board, and we're looking at incorporating naturalization. So how do we do a pre-treat with our product and then getting into designed wetlands to optimize and use phytoremediation or plant uptake of negative metals and things like that in the water, while we drop the solids out using our passive product and things like that. So combination of industry, naturalization, communication, again, with local indigenous communities, I think is critical. If we're going to maintain, instead of always having this rebellion between the two, let's learn how to work together. So that would be my comment.
Awesome. I love it. I have long said that as an industry, the mining industry, it does an abysmal job of communicating all the good things that we do. And that would certainly, for me, that would certainly help diffuse or at least mitigate some of the perceptions in the faraway places like capital cities among students and others that, you know, we're just out there pillaging the national resources and, you know, destroying the national environment. And it's an interesting dilemma. You look at the oil industry. I mean, goodness, I grew up with those ads on television, and they're back on television now, you know, like, oh, drive around and see the parks, you know, thanks to us oil companies providing that for fuel for your car. The mining industry has never tried to make the point that there is no car if there is no mining. Hello, we're very friendly. We're helping your car to be built. And of course, in today's economy, we're not making the point that, hello, you love this phone? We're making that phone. Basically, it doesn't exist if we don't mine. So I 100% agree, Jerry, that communication is key and that we need to do a better job systemically on explaining to people who we are and what we do and how we do it, and not just give tours to politicians, but be more open to bring the students in and let everybody look around. I want to pick up on a theme that both of you touched on. Angie, when you were talking specifically about the programs for the women and the seamstresses, and you, Jerry, talking about Indigenous people, which generally speaking, Indigenous issues tend to be thorny ones for mining companies in almost every country of the world, because obviously Indigenous peoples exist everywhere. They were there first. And I want to tie that into the other set of acronyms that are so popular these days, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And I know that for Freeport in the Congo, it was a cultural issue in terms of our attempts to recruit women to work for us, because there was a cultural and in one case, actually religious prohibition against women doing certain kinds of jobs, you know, and especially going underground. That was a big no-no. You could never be working underground, etc. So that obviously has an impact on how diverse can the company's workforce be, and how much equity can there be with these sorts of limitations on women's participation. But I would love to hear from both of you, your thoughts in that regard.
Yep, sure. I'm happy to go. And great question, especially as we celebrate International Women's Day this week, which our company certainly took the time to do. You know, I think, you know, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, you know, there's no debate over the link between diversity and performance. And there's been a million studies that have validated that there in fact is a link between diversity and organizational performance on a number of factors, whether they be financial performance measures, reputation measures, social license, employee culture and relationships. And so I think, you know, solving these kinds of problems really does require diversity of thought and diversity of experience, which is more likely to come in organizations with higher gender diversity. So, you know, at Torx, we're proud. We have a really high degree of gender equity, and I think it shows up in our results. To be clear, though, we don't believe in gender quotas. We don't set them to boost female representation in the workforce. What we do is we make a very strong effort to make sure we open the door to females and other minority groups in our recruiting practices at all levels of the organization. And when we do that, we hire the best person for the job, no matter the gender, no matter the color, no matter the sexual orientation. And it's worked well for us. So at the board level, as an example, we've got 44% female representation. In our executive team, of which I'm a member, we have 50% female representation, including our CEO, who's a woman. In our operations, we've got about 18% of our management team is comprised of women. And it's really in the operations that we have more work to do. We've got about 14% female representation. But to your point, Melissa, I think, it's hard to attract young women, especially to mining, given the perceptions that exist there. And so we've had to get creative. And I'll just give you an example of one of the things that we did. Back in 2017, a woman named Estella, she's from one of our local communities, was hired by the operations, and she was trained and to drive a 90-ton haulage truck. These trucks are huge, huge trucks. And very quickly, she demonstrated herself as one of the best operators we had. She drove with discipline, responsibility, focus. She was safe, and just one of our best operators. So as a result, the operation said, "Oh, geez, I think maybe we should hire more women to drive these trucks." And so we began a haul truck operator training program. We had 16 local women in our first cohort. And since then, we've trained 27 women, and of those, 16 continue to work for us today. They're all from local communities, all from Guerrero State. And I think really breaking the stigmas of the role of women in mining. And so, we're proud of that program, but certainly we have a lot more work to do. The other thing I'll say is, I think when we talk about D&I, diversity and inclusion, it seems now to just mean adding women or adding visible minorities to the boards or to our workforce or to our executive team. But I think for Torx, inclusion is more than that. And, when you think about it, it's a verb. It's centered on this idea of making discrete and individual things part of a whole. And it's underpinned by a feeling of belonging. And so just on this sort of example of inclusion, last year we started construction of something we call Portal 3. It's part of our underground. It's to better access resources at depth and to shorten haul distances. So clearly a clear business purpose, but our management team took it upon themselves to have it architecturally designed. It was painted by a local Mexican artist. It's absolutely beautiful. And beside it is a religious statue of the Guadalupe Virgin to look over the safety of our workers. It's something that means a lot to our workers. And so the local bishop came in and blessed it. There was a mass that was attended by many of our employees. And again, I think to me, it's just a great example of how we've created the sense of inclusion, the sense of family, and the sense of belonging, and just kind of a different way of thinking about D&I.
Wow, kudos to you guys. I think that's really outstanding, really. Jerry, since you brought up Indigenous people, do you want to continue on the line?
Well, I can continue on kind of both notes, I guess.
Since you are an Indigenous person.
Yeah, because I am Indigenous, yes. My grandmother would be very happy. What I've seen on as far as the women, I find it's very almost culturally based on where you're located. In Canada, in the regions that I've been working in over the while, we have quite a few women that are in the regulatory side, operational side. I know of multiple friends of mine, their daughters are heavy equipment operators. My daughter-in-law is actually Indigenous as well, and she is actually a fully trained electrician and worked a lot on various sites for the companies that do this. So it's interesting that where I go into more of the other countries, you will see less of that based on their cultural diversity or their cultural input that they have there. I'm hoping that that's more and more included and inclusive of women. I lecture a lot at the universities for the engineering and the chemistry side, as I said, and I would suggest that probably where it used to be not as heavily weighed, I would say it's probably at least 50% women now, which is awesome, especially the engineering side is really changing over. I'm quite impressed with that. But something that's also there is we're not having enough Indigenous people. Where we're having the challenge is we're getting a lot of people from Asia, a lot of people from various European. I would say probably only 30% of my classes are typically local. Now, I've just started doing some work with GCU here in Arizona, and I'm noticing again a lot of uptake. There's a lot of females involved in that, and also they're getting into the sciences side a lot more where they weren't before, which is awesome. But again, I'm still not seeing that Indigenous piece. So I'm struggling, and that's one of the programs I was trying to launch in Canada is how do I outreach? How do I bring those people in? Now, one of the programs I suggested and I tried to get worked in, I was on the board, an advisory board for environmental sciences for about 5 years with the University of Alberta. And I finally got approval, and then the government changed and we lost all our funding. But what I was doing was I was saying, look, the Indigenous people don't necessarily have the education level that they need to be into a university, but they also don't have exposure. So is there a way for us that we could set up a program, which is a learning program on environmental science, if you will, but at a basic level, where they could come in and just take training on technologies, work programs that could be available, career path, and something like that. Maybe make it a 6-month program, credited, that if they decided and they get exposed to what's available at the next level, so that they could go up and they could move into that next level. It was a unique, nobody done it before. And now it looks like we're finally getting somewhere with it. Another friend of mine, one of the professors, has started one where we're actually doing Indigenous training, and we're part of the program around the environmental sciences specifically. So it is starting, but I think we need more of that. I think we need to have exposure to it. I think, and it doesn't matter what culture, as you said, Mel, Indigenous is everywhere. But how do we expose those locals to a basic education if they don't have it, and then showcase what could be next, and maybe figure out ways for an easier path, not just give it to them, make them understand like everybody else it has to be worked for, but the whole program is at least give them exposure, some kind of funding to help them because they don't necessarily always have the funding, but get them out of that routine of being just the same. It was interesting. I was in India doing a program. We took 50 master's and PhD students from all over the world and met as a water innovation lab in India. And we traveled all the world, all the areas of India. And one of the spaces that we went to was what they call the salt pads, the salt ponds. And they make the natural salt and they ship it off, etc. They've been doing the same area for over 1,000 years. 10 people living in this village, and their biggest growth plan was to get their kid to do the same thing dad did. So the government opened up highways, they opened up a school close by, and now they're taking these children and they're taking them to school, and they're getting an education that they never had an opportunity for before. The only problem is now all of this planning or program that they've been working on for 1,000 years is now going to disappear. It's only going to be a tourist attraction eventually, if anything. So it's a fine balance, because do the parents want it? Don't they want it? But I think with the Indigenous groups that we have and everybody I've talked to, we've hired a numerous amount of the Indigenous cultures around us up in Canada. We haven't started that here yet, but I am working with 2 First Nations groups here, hopefully that we can. How do you just get that, again, communication? How do you get them to see what's there? How do you get them to be participant? And again, like you said, Mel, if you're a participant, you're less adverse.
Yeah.
You don't have that fight as much if they see what it is. But you got to be doing something good. We have to still be stewards of the environment. We can't just go in there and destroy the area and then walk away. So I think it's finding that new balance, or the green mining technology that incorporates everybody. So,
Melissa, can I just say something? Just Jerry, what you say resonates with me so much, and just in terms of showing a different future, right, or a different default future. And I think putting my hat on when working here in Sudbury with the Indigenous communities, it was so important to the chief for young people to see people that had come to work for the mine, and that, you know, they could buy nice vehicles and they could buy a nice house. And there's this saying, you know, you can't be what you can't see. And it was so important for him, for young people to see what's possible. And similarly in Mexico, you know, unfortunately in the area that we operate, a lot of young women, like really young women, get married very young. They have children because that's sort of the only default future that they see. And that's why we're working so hard to try and say, no, but look at Estella, or look at, you know, these other women that have come and, you know, are earning their own living and living independently. And, you know, and so just to sort of shift that focus on what would be sort of an automatic default future to something different. Not to say it's something better. I mean, some women may want to, you know, but I'm just saying, just to demonstrate what's possible and to yeah. So.
Yeah, and that's beautifully said. That in essence, the company responsibility is to demonstrate what's possible, but we're not about forcing anybody to do anything, and we're not trying to denigrate or degrade the importance of cultural traditions. So that's that fine line that particularly when it comes to Indigenous issues, that companies need to walk. I want to shift away from my favorite topic, people, and talk for a second about environment. And for me, you know, when we look at our global situation, I think water might be the real defining issue of environmental sustainability. And we're fortunate enough to have sort of Mr. Water here to talk about that. And I'm impressed already with some of the things, Angie, that you've previewed. So let's switch for a second to water. I think let's frame it this way. What can companies best do to ensure that they are appropriately sourcing and conserving their operational water, while at the same time safeguarding the clean water and the water needs of the local communities nearby? And Jerry, this time we'll start with you.
sure. I think we need to envision differently than we have been in the past many years. Not much has changed over the last 50 to 100 years, or, you know, even go back, talk about mining back in long before my grandfather was even alive. But things haven't changed that much, but we need to change how we design things, so to me, water treatment is not about water treatment, it's about solids management. Water has to be looked upon as a byproduct. The byproduct is to be used, recycled, reused, or released, however you want to do it. But solids management takes you to a holistic approach. When you're having surface mining influences or surface disturbances that get into water areas. So in a lot of your mines where you're now going in and you're opening up a new area, you've got a lot of stripped area and you've got all of this material. Well, how do you stabilize that so it doesn't get down into the water courses if there's a rain event? How do you manage your materials underground if you, instead of having to take stuff up top and do separation and do all that kind of stuff? How do you manage slurries? That's a big one. We've come up with a program, and I do have a chance sometime today. I'll show you a real quick demo. Mel's seen it, and it does shows quite an impact. But how do you take solids out, leave the water as a byproduct, and then also take that slurry material and bind it without having to increase mass? Because haulage fees or haulage maintenance and equipment requirements can cost dramatically to the mine's operational budgets, things like that. So how do you manage things better? How do you have a holistic approach on surface stability, binding of sediments, taking out of various metals? One of the biggest things we have down in this region is arsenic. How do you manage arsenic, both in total and dissolved? Well, Clearflow, we've figured out a way to do that. We can actually take out total and dissolve. How do you manage things like phosphorus, orthophosphates build up and things like that? There again, that's something that we focused on, and we're just launching some product lines for that. How do you manage, fluorides, which is new to us? We actually have just got into doing that for the mines now. So a lot of changes. The mining are starting to identify water and its components, which I think is brilliant, instead of just water. What's in the water, let's take it out that we need to, and let's reuse it where we can. Let's conserve it where we can. Let's keep a better quality water going out to the offsite locations or wherever we're releasing it to. Agriculture is a very critical mass. You don't have a lot of rain here. How do we have water supply? Well, then that means how many times can you recycle water? There's a lot of variables that are involved. And I think if we start looking at the components within the water and focus on water quality and its components and use solids removals and solids management as our key factor, I think we'll get much further ahead, because that holistic approach has got to be involved. It really, really does.
100% agree. And I have to say, yes, I love Jerry's technology. I'm sure we won't have time to actually do a presentation on that, Jerry, but because the visual impact is so strong, while we all continue talking, why don't you go ahead and show what got there. Angie?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I defer to Jerry. I'm definitely not the expert on water management, and it sounds like Jerry's company has some pretty great technologies, because I will say for our operations, that's an area where, we really focus on continuous improvement in terms of our water management plan, especially now with bringing on Media Luna as a new mine. We have to obviously make adjustments to our plan going forward and look for additional opportunities for recycling, as an example. It's a challenge for us in Guerrero because half the year it's a very dry season, and then the other half of the year is the rainy season. And I know just this past summer, we had record precipitation events. Melissa, you talk about climate change, and obviously the whole world is feeling the effects of that. So again, that needs to be factored into water management plans. And I would say for our operations, again, we operate right beside the Balsas River. So the area we operate right now is called ELG. There's the Balsas River, which is a really important economic and critical resource in the region. And then Media Luna will be on the other side of the river. And so just in terms of our approach, we really, focus on robust systems to promote water efficiency. Our water management system it's been designed to maximize recycling by collecting and reusing water. And our processing facility is actually designed as a closed loop system. We've got a series of ponds that the water flows through. And so even though we're permitted to discharge water, we actually operate as a zero discharge site, which we're proud of. And so, and the other thing I'll say, water monitoring obviously is very, very important. So we have our own robust monitoring system. We conduct samples or collect samples daily, but we also have a partnership with the Autonomous University of Guerrero. So they conduct independent third-party sampling. The results are shared with the community very openly, again, to just build trust that not only are we saying the water is fine, but we've got this third-party agreement to do the monitoring and share the results. So
yeah, see, and all of that, every bit of that matters. And when Jerry, for instance, talks about taking arsenic out of the water for the gold industry, there's a big one right there. For those who've been watching Jerry in the background swirling those two cups around, what you saw happen is all of the precipitate that was in that original cup, all the dirt and everything else, turned into that solid material, that dark brown solid material. That's how his technology precipitates out all of the sludge and everything and leaves you with a nice gray water ready for alternative usage. So unfortunately, it looks like we need to sort of turn towards our closing comments. And so I want to end where we began. in terms of it's always, mining has always been a high risk proposition, but given global changes, it seems to be becoming ever more complicated. So the final question to both of you is this: in a risky world, what is your company's biggest challenge? And conversely, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for either your company or the mining industry? Angie, why don't you go first?
Sure, Melissa. I think we could talk all day about this question because it's, you know, to your earlier point, there's indeed a confluence of pretty significant challenges and risks surrounding our industry. And I think a challenge in of itself is having robust systems and controls in place to make sure each risk and challenge is being identified and managed appropriately, as well as the collective. And so, yeah, definitely no shortage of challenges and also no shortages of opportunities. So I think, you know, I mentioned earlier, we're building Media Luna. With the build of that project will come hundreds of new contractors on our site. And many of our existing workforce will transition from open pit operations to underground operations. So there's going to be a lot of change, a lot of new people on our site, a lot of retraining required. And so I think for us, and I think for many mining companies more generally, just given that mining by its nature, you know, is a pretty high hazard environment, lots of risks that need to be managed day in and day out. So I would say the biggest risk and challenge is maintaining the health and safety of our people and our surrounding communities, because I think at the core, you know, if you're not a safe operation, then your social license to operate is going to be compromised, especially as expectations and maybe what was tolerated 5, 10, 20 years ago just isn't going to be tolerated today. And so, you know, I'm not going to get into it. We have a really robust health and safety management system. We have been very deliberate about the systems, the people systems we put in place to create a workplace culture that makes people want to come to work every day, makes people want to do their best, and makes people want to work safely. And, you know, in addition to the sort of hard controls that we have in place, lots to talk about there, we also make a concerted effort to sort of connect the head with the heart and to give people a reason to work safely and to focus on family and to focus on the importance of getting home safely and so forth. And so, you know, we're pretty proud of our safety record. We're actually now, we've exceeded more than 7 million hours worked without a lost time injury. We had one lost time injury in 2021, and before that celebrated more than 10 million hours without a lost time injury. And I think, again, you know, we really believe that with good safety comes good performance, comes good cost management, comes good employee relations, and all of those important things. And so at the same time, while we had, you know, a really good year on safety, we marked our highest production year ever last year. So, you know, again, just underline my point that with good safety comes good production. In terms of opportunities, again, I'll just go quickly because I know we're running out of time, but you talked about, Melissa, earlier, climate change, and that presents real challenges, and certainly that is true. But, you know, for us, we really see that as an opportunity as well. So with the transition to our Media Luna project, right now, we're primarily a gold company, but 30% of the value of the Media Luna deposit sits in copper. And so, you know, we're going to become now a copper and a gold producer. And certainly, you know, as we know, copper is really critical to the transition to green economy in terms of technologies around battery storage and so forth. And so, you know, demand is expected to be very strong for copper over the coming years. And so we see that as a real opportunity. And then in terms of our own work to develop a climate change strategy, which we're very busy at work there, a lot of the enabling technologies to reduce carbon are going to have other business benefits, whether it be cost or so forth. And so again, just a quick example, last year we announced our intention to build an 8.5 megawatt solar plant. Really, this is our first foray into renewable energy. And it has the potential to reduce our Scope 2 emissions by roughly 9%. And in addition to the environmental benefits, when you look at the economic benefits, when you factor all the installed cost and the lease fee and so forth, we expect to save about $1 million per year in our energy costs over a 20-year lease period. So again, really significant. And I know, there's lots of technologies out there that can provide similar opportunities to provide not only an environmental benefit, but a business benefit as well.
Excellent. Jerry, any pithy thought?
Well, again, from a risk perspective, the risk that we face is people doing nothing. People wanting to follow the same line that they've been following for the last 30 years because they don't feel that there's a need for change. That, I believe, is a critical one. And with climate change coming about, I agree that there's definite opportunities that are going to be benefited from that, because the metals mining sector has really increased dramatically, and their need for being more environmentally, sensitive to the environment around them, but not just the environment around them, but also downstream of them. And I think that's becoming a big factor. So that, as far as I see, is a big benefit for our company and what we do. And our biggest thing is, from a risk factor, is to continue to get as much exposure as we can to show that there are technologies out there, ours and ones that we've teamed up with. We've got involved with, there's a program that we're doing right now where we can do live data on metals analysis. So real-time data that sends back every 5 minutes on what's in the water. So you can now do live analysis. We got into a program where we're doing flood modeling. There's a program that's out there that was developed in Alberta, and it's actually a friend of mine in Ontario actually owns the rights to the technology now. And we're actually bringing that together and saying, okay, well, let's identify based on historical data and then also flood modeling what can happen, where the hotspots are, so we treat where it needs to be treated. Then we're not running helter-skelter. We can now identify the components within the water, treat the water for those components, involve naturalization processes, so you have now more nature type of uptake, and then do an analysis on the outflow. So now you have a full treatment train, which makes sense in the world of, again, what we talked about with the Aboriginal cultures and various other things, and doing good things that are visible. You can't see something underground. You might be doing something good. Nobody's going to know about it. So how do you make this communication factor and increase? And I think that's a big benefit of what we're trying to do, and having the opportunity to speak on things like this. Gabriella, again, thank you so much. And Mel, always a pleasure to see you, and we'll be seeing you again very soon, I hope. But these are the type of things that I think need to be addressed. I hope in some ways that, Gabriella, we can share the information or contact information for who was on here today, so that we can, if they have questions, they can get back to us directly. We didn't have much time to talk, but we want to be able to speak directly to those people that have the need for this change, or want to discuss it and bring opportunities, or even bring comments of how we can learn how to do our jobs better. I think that's a very important thing as well. So I'm all in. I think this is brilliant. I really appreciate this. And Angie, we have to talk.
Well, and Jerry, I was going to say, when you're in Sudbury, yes, we will connect after this. I'd love to meet you in person.
That's awesome. Shall do. Okay.
So there you go, guys. The closing word is, in a risky world, there's reason to be optimistic. Things are changing for the better. People are working all the time on improved technologies and better solutions to keep people safe and to keep the world healthy. Thanks, Gabby, for letting me moderate this group. I knew it was going to be a good conversation.
Yeah.
It really could have taken 2 or 3 hours, but oh well, we do what we can do.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for accepting the invitation and sharing your knowledge, expertise, and experience. Hope to see you soon. Doug, do you want to say some words?
Great conversation. Really appreciate it. Really enlightening, all of you. Jerry, your background, I'd love to connect up with you as well. And I know Hank is getting you guys involved with Global Chamber, so we look forward to that. Angie, extraordinary. You know, it's interesting to see the reverse for your company, where you've got more women in management than women in the workforce, which is very unusual and very enlightening to see. And you spoke very eloquently, not just about that, but really about these issues that are so important. I will leave somewhat of a counterpoint to what Mel said. Yes, things are changing, but quite honestly, I'm impatient about change. I'm upset, and I know Mel, you are too. So I know I'm preaching to the choir. I'm upset that we don't make faster change. And I was on a call this morning with Turkey, one of our new members there, and she said something that really impacted me. She said, you know, money all stays in the same place. So her frustration in the investment community was that, you know, people who have money are just kind of trading it back and forth, and the people who can really make an impact on the world don't necessarily get a lot of that. It doesn't filter down, it doesn't trickle down as fast as it should. So we have a responsibility to make change faster than what's happening. And I very much believe that, especially after being somewhat of a moderator, or at least I was asked for my comments on the Women's International Day the other day. We did 4 events at Global Chamber, and we kind of got at the end like, well, progress is happening. And I got on and did my counterpoint then, is like, well, yeah, it's happening, but it's not happening fast enough. And what it's going to take is people who are impatient about not fast enough change with women, people who are impatient about sustainability and creating a faster and cleaner environment, impacting climate change, but also just sustainability of the industry, right? And overall. So I encourage all of you to be, one, happy that things are changing, but also impatient, because there's a lot more progress to be made. Thank you, Gabby, for taking the time to put this program together. It was great. It really was. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, everybody. So we'll talk soon and we'll keep in touch. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.